I love men. I think men are the coolest. But you don't really need them to live.
We had so much fun, and it really kept us closer longer than I really wanted.
Cher once admitted that certain men entered her life at moments that changed everything. Some relationships lasted only briefly, but each left a mark on one of the most fascinating lives in Hollywood history. Behind the music, the movies, and the glittering fame was a woman navigating love in a world where nothing ever stayed private for long. Across 6 remarkable decades, a few men appeared during pivotal chapters of her life, some bringing passion, some bringing heartbreak, and others leaving behind memories that time never quite erased. Now, looking back at the extraordinary journey of her life, Cher has spoken openly about 6 men she once shared romantic relationships with, each one arriving during a different chapter of her remarkable story. And each of these relationships reveals a surprising chapter of Hollywood history that few people truly know. Number 1. David Geffen. In the early 1970s, Hollywood was going through a quiet transformation. The polished studio system that once controlled every career was fading, and a new generation of powerful figures was beginning to shape the entertainment world from behind the scenes. One of those rising figures was David Geffen. At the time, Geffen was not yet the legendary industry titan people would later recognize. He was simply an ambitious young music executive with sharp instincts and a remarkable understanding of how the music business worked. Not long afterward, he would help build Geffen Records, a label that would influence generations of artists. It was during this period that Geffen and Cher crossed paths. Cher was already famous, but her life had become complicated. Fame had brought her enormous success, yet it had also placed her under constant scrutiny. In that uncertain moment, Geffen represented something different, someone intelligent, calm, and deeply connected within the entertainment world. Their relationship was never meant to be a dramatic Hollywood romance. Instead, it was quieter, more private, almost like two people finding comfort in understanding each other's world. For a short time, they shared dinners, conversations about music, and the strange pressures that come with living under public attention. Geffen admired Cher's independence and strength, while Cher appreciated his thoughtful perspective on the industry. But life has a way of shifting directions. Eventually, Geffen began to embrace his true identity and later came out as gay, something that required tremendous courage during an era when Hollywood was far less accepting than it is today. Their relationship ended naturally, without bitterness or scandal. Years later, Cher would remember him not as a lost love, but as someone who briefly shared a meaningful chapter of her life. Sometimes relationships don't end with heartbreak. Sometimes they simply fade into respectful memories. And in the long story of Cher's life, David Geffen remained one of those quiet, early chapters. Number 2. Gene Simmons. By the late 1970s, the world of music had become louder, wilder, and far more theatrical than ever before. Rock concerts were no longer just performances, they were spectacles. Fire, costumes, and electric guitars dominated the stage, and few bands captured that explosive era better than Kiss. At the center of that storm stood Gene Simmons. With his dramatic stage persona and unmistakable charisma, Simmons had become one of the most recognizable figures in rock music. But away from the makeup and the roaring crowds, he was surprisingly thoughtful, even introspective. It was during this energetic period that Simmons met Cher. Their meeting came through the tight circles of the music industry, where artists, producers, and performers often crossed paths at parties and recording studios. At first, Simmons was simply intrigued by Cher's presence. She was already a legendary performer, confident, witty, and completely comfortable in her own skin. For Cher, Simmons represented something different from the Hollywood actors and executives she had known. He came from the intense, rebellious world of rock music, where rules were rarely followed and individuality was everything. Their relationship soon grew into something genuine. The two spent time together away from the cameras, discovering that they shared a surprising number of similarities. Both had built their careers through determination, both understood the relentless demands of fame, and both possessed a sharp sense of humor about the absurdities of celebrity life. Yet the lives they lived were always moving at full speed. Tour schedules, recordings, and the endless obligations of the entertainment industry made it difficult for any relationship to remain steady. Over time, their paths slowly began to separate. There was no dramatic breakup, no scandal, just two successful people realizing that their lives were pulling them in different directions. Years later, Simmons would speak respectfully about Cher, often describing her as one of the most remarkable women he had ever known. And sometimes, respect is the quietest form of love that remains long after a relationship ends. Number 3. Val Kilmer. By the early 1980s, Hollywood had entered a new era. A fresh generation of actors was arriving, bringing with them a different kind of charisma, less polished, more unpredictable, and often deeply passionate about their craft. Among them was Val Kilmer. Kilmer was young, intense, and already gaining attention for his remarkable presence on screen. There was something magnetic about him, an artistic seriousness that set him apart from many of the rising stars of that time. When he met Cher, the connection surprised both of them. There was a noticeable age difference, and their lives moved in very different circles. Cher had already experienced the highs and lows of global fame, while Kilmer was just beginning to build his reputation in Hollywood. Yet from their first conversations, they discovered an unexpected bond. Cher was drawn to Kilmer's intelligence and sensitivity. Beneath his confident exterior, she saw a thoughtful artist who cared deeply about his work and the world around him. Kilmer, in turn, admired Cher's strength. She had survived the unpredictable storms of fame and remained unapologetically herself. Their relationship soon grew into something genuine. They spent long evenings talking about films, music, and the strange pressure of being watched by the public. There were quiet dinners, private moments away from the spotlight, and the rare comfort that comes when two people truly understand each other. But like many relationships in Hollywood, their timing was not perfect. Careers were accelerating, opportunities were pulling them in different directions, and the relentless pace of the industry made it difficult to hold on to something fragile. Eventually, the romance faded, yet what remained was something unusual. Instead of drifting apart completely, Cher and Kilmer stayed friends for decades. Even years later, when Kilmer faced serious health struggles, Cher was one of the people who stood by him with quiet support. Sometimes a relationship ends, but the connection never truly disappears. Number 4. Tom Cruise. In the mid-1980s, Hollywood was witnessing the rise of a new kind of movie star. A young generation of actors was beginning to dominate the box office, bringing fresh energy and confidence to the screen. Among them was a rising talent who would soon become one of the most recognizable faces in the world: Tom Cruise. At the time, Cruise was still early in his career. He had already attracted attention for his dedication and intense work ethic, but the global superstardom that would follow films like Top Gun had not yet fully arrived. It was during this period that he met Cher. The meeting happened at a formal event connected to the White House, where several celebrities had gathered for a charitable cause. In a room filled with powerful figures and famous faces, something unexpected happened. Two people from completely different stages of life found themselves talking for hours. Cher was already an established legend in entertainment. Cruise, meanwhile, was a young actor on the brink of becoming a global phenomenon. Despite the difference in age and experience, the two quickly discovered a playful chemistry between them. What began as friendly conversation soon developed into a brief but memorable romance. They spent time together quietly, away from the cameras, enjoying moments that felt surprisingly normal despite their extraordinary lives. Cher later recalled that Cruise was charming, thoughtful, and far more mature than many people assumed at the time. But Hollywood moves quickly, As Cruz's career began to accelerate at breathtaking speed, his life became increasingly consumed by film projects, travel, and global fame. The rhythm of their lives no longer matched the same pace. Their relationship eventually faded, not because of conflict, but simply because life carried them in different directions. Years later, Cher would look back on that time with warmth and even humor, once describing Cruz as one of the most memorable men she had ever dated. Some relationships last a lifetime. Others live quietly in the past, like a brief chapter from a different era of Hollywood. Number 5. Rob Camilletti. By the mid-1980s, Cher had already lived several different lives in the public eye. She had conquered music charts, television, and films, and she carried the confidence of someone who had survived every rise and fall that fame could bring. But sometimes the most unexpected stories begin far away from the glamorous world of Hollywood. That was exactly how she met Rob Camilletti. Camilletti was not a movie star or a powerful music executive. In fact, he was working at a bagel shop in Los Angeles when their paths crossed. He was young, relaxed, and completely removed from the intense spotlight that surrounded Cher's life. The difference in their worlds and their ages immediately caught the attention of the media. Cher was already 40 years old, a global icon who had spent decades performing in front of millions. Camilletti, on the other hand, was just 22. The tabloids quickly gave him a nickname that would follow him everywhere: Bagel Boy. But behind the jokes and headlines, something real was happening. Cher seemed to appreciate the simplicity that Camilletti brought into her life. He treated her not like a superstar, but like a normal person. There were quiet dinners, casual evenings, and small moments that didn't involve red carpets or flashing cameras. For a while, the relationship worked. They traveled together, attended events side by side, and even appeared on red carpets where photographers eagerly captured every moment of the unusual couple. Yet the constant attention eventually became difficult to ignore. Every outing turned into a headline. Every photograph became a conversation for tabloids and television shows. After nearly 3 years together, the relationship slowly came to an end. There was no dramatic scandal. Just two people realizing that their lives were moving in different directions. Still, Camilletti remained one of the most talked-about figures in Cher's romantic history. Sometimes love surprises everyone, including the people living it. Number 6. Alexander Edwards. Even after more than 60 years in the public eye, Cher has never stopped surprising people. By the time she entered her late 70s, many assumed the legendary performer would prefer a quiet, private life, far from the gossip columns that once followed her every move. But Cher has always lived by her own rules, and in 2022, the world once again found itself talking about her personal life. That was when she began spending time with Alexander Edwards. Edwards, a music industry executive who had previously been linked to model Amber Rose, was much younger than Cher. In fact, the age difference between them quickly became the focus of headlines around the world. Predictably, the internet had plenty to say, but Cher seemed completely unbothered. For someone who had spent decades navigating public judgment, the opinions of strangers no longer carried much weight. Instead, she responded with the same humor and confidence that had defined her career. When critics questioned the relationship, Cher famously remarked that love doesn't know math. Behind the headlines, those close to her described a relationship built on genuine companionship. Edwards worked within the music business, which meant he understood the rhythm of the entertainment industry and the pressures that come with it. For Cher, who had lived through multiple eras of fame, that understanding mattered. They were occasionally seen together at fashion shows, industry events, and private gatherings. Moments that showed a relaxed and comfortable connection rather than a dramatic celebrity romance. Whether the relationship lasts for years or simply becomes another chapter in Cher's long life story, it reflects something essential about her character. Even after decades of fame, criticism, and reinvention, she still approaches life with curiosity and independence. Because for Cher, the rules that define other people's lives have never really applied. And perhaps that fearless spirit is exactly why the world has never stopped watching. Looking back across the decades, the life of Cher reads almost like a long Hollywood film, filled with triumphs, reinventions, and unexpected turns. Fame brought her global success, but the quieter moments of her life were often shaped by the people she met along the way. Some relationships lasted only a short time. Others turned into lasting friendships. Yet each of these men entered Cher's life during a different chapter, leaving behind memories that became part of her remarkable journey. And perhaps that's the real truth about life. Not every love is meant to stay forever. Sometimes it simply becomes part of the story. If you enjoyed this look back at Hollywood's unforgettable legends, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more timeless stories from the golden age of entertainment.